Good afternoon, everybody. It's Friday, which means it's the last word, a Chrisman Commentary weekly drama. Christy, KP, hello and happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday, except for Cowboys fans.
Except for Cowboys fans, go Lions. Forward down the field.
I like that you're singing for us. I mean, this is going to be a big football weekend. We were talking about right before, right? SEC championship.
Shout out SEC championship. By the way, if anyone has tickets, a friend of mine is going to be in town and is very interested in attending. So just let us know.
Yeah. The name is Christy.
No. Let's be fair. It's Christy's husband. That's his real name, but I think that's how he's known in the industry, as Christy's husband.
Right.
Turns out we're going to be in Atlanta through Opens Doors, because we made a donation at Opens Doors, and Eddie Perez put up some tickets for the suite to the Seahawks Falcons game. So we're coming in to see the Seahawks Falcons game. And apparently we land in time on Saturday that we could go to the SEC game. So my husband was like, why don't you just find us a ticket? So there you go. Christy's husband is interested in that.
I will say Eddie is one of the most generous human beings in our industry.
Yeah.
And I mean, he is a giver. And what I always like to joke with him is like, he has single owner problems, right? So like, you know what I mean? So the four of us at PRMG. So it's not like, oh yeah, sure, take this, take that. He's like, yeah, he's like overloaded, and so but I tell you what, he is a giving, generous human being.
He is. And the event that he does every year is another great example of that giving, right? It's just incredible. The American gift. Yeah, tag. So Christy, you're like all over the place. You just came from a hot tub party with the Talbot brothers.
Here in Austin, they're going to do a free pop-up Christmas show tonight at Stubbs at 9:00. They go on stage at 9. Doors open at 8, but it is completely free.
Nice.
So if you want to come out and support up-and-coming artists, and you happen to be in the Austin area, KP, sad you're not here, you could definitely go.
Well, ironically, a buddy of mine, Ali, owns a company called Kyber Mortgage. His Christmas party is in Austin tomorrow at Stubbs. So I will be at Stubbs tomorrow night at 6.
Oh, right on. Small world.
Well, if they're in town tonight, tell them about the Talbot brothers.
He's not going 2 nights in a row, trust me.
So let's get into the show here, the meat of the show. And I'd like to start just by sharing a little MISMO update. So this week, I think it was Wednesday, we held a virtual tech sprint around the mortgage compliance data set, the MCD, which is tomorrow, I think, will be the newest standard published under MISMO. 3 years in the making, this mortgage compliance data set. And so Wednesday, there was a 4-hour, virtual tech sprint where we had the MISMO team, the team from the Conference of State Bank Supervisors. So think of the trade association for all the state regulators. Over 550 people registered for this event, virtual. What was cool about it was about half the attendees were mortgage professionals, and then 125, 130 attendees were actual state regulators. And then the balance were technology vendor, type folks that are building around this MCD. And some of the cool takeaways from this event were lenders going on the virtual stage and sharing how once this thing is adopted, and adoption of the MCD happens in a couple places. It happens at the lender level, of course, because they're the ones that have to produce these data sets for the regulators. But then they also require adoption by the tech providers, typically LOS, some of the compliance technology platforms. But the biggest adoption will happen at the state level. The states actually, accepting this uniform data set versus the chaos that happens today. If you're a multi-state lender like PRMG, you get 40 some unique requests for similar but different data, all in a different format with different labels, blah 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 blah. The MCD initiative is going to bring that all into one uniform data set. And so we had lenders kind of describing what that will mean for their business, in terms of cost savings, but it's really reallocating resources that otherwise would be chasing down data and have them do kind of higher value, risk.
Oh, Brian, I can no longer hear you. I don't know about everybody else.
Let me take it over. He's on an old phone that's not on the MISMO audio data standard set, and so sometimes it just gets a little crosswire. Go ahead.
Well, my phone was ringing. It's wired into my speaker. And Tony Keiko, if you're out there, I'll call you back.
Hi, Tony.
Everybody knows Tony.
Yeah, isn't it amazing how everyone always calls you in the middle of this? And yeah, it's.
Well, I don't know why my phone decides to all of a sudden sync up to my my computer speaker, but that's another story. Last thing I'll say on the MCD tech sprint was Rocket was talking about building their own internal process using that same data set so they can test in real time, right? So not waiting for the states to pull requests, but just test in real time, and then as needed make corrections before any state audit. So it was super cool to see all these parties come together on this tech sprint at the MISMO January summit. The second of 3 of these virtual, or now this will be in real life workshop will happen there. And then in February at the NMLS annual conference, the CSBS will host its own tech sprint where the vendors will come and demo what they're building and how they're going to implement and deploy the MCD. So it was cool. This is my first real big event, as being part of MISMO. It was just cool to see this cross section of the industry come together to solve a pretty big problem.
I saw a demo of a tech company I've been kind of keeping in contact for about 2-3 years, and everyone's talking about AI. So how does AI and MISMO kind of merge together? And so this was probably the most important, just high level bullet point use case. So because a lot of us who are listening on here and lenders are trying to think about our AI strategy going forward. So what they did is they used the MISMO data set for for naming, file convention, nomenclature, all this stuff, and by doing so and then setting all their rules, what they did was they set up the ability to swap out the different AI models. And so if they want to use Perplexity, or they want to use Anthropic, or they want to use OpenAI, Google's Gemini, they because the standard set is there, they are swapping out AI models to learn off that set. And so because these models keep getting better, right?
Yeah.
By these humongous hyperscalers and what they're doing with it. And so when you think about building a clock as opposed to just telling time, if you have a data standard set, you have a framework, so something needs to be changed out, you could do that, and so I thought it was a really interesting use case of using MISMO, because imagine you built your whole thing on X, on this AI model, and now there's one that's literally 5 times better and half the price.
Yeah.
So how do you swap that out and then start training on that when you want to do that? This is kind of that roadmap. And so I thought that was everyone's talking about AI, and I would say most of us, aren't really thinking of AI like that, but I just want to share that nugget with the audience.
And do you want to share who it was, or do you want to just send me okay, can you text me the who it is so I can do a follow-up?
Yeah, well, I texted you already about another one, and you owe me a follow-up.
I do owe you, and I will follow up.
You're too busy germinating LinkedIn with your content. And by the way, I read I read probably 4 of your MISMO articles, and I read about this data set. I spent because Thursday night's my night where I don't leave the office no matter how late it is until I've read everything. And I read a lot of stuff you put out there, and I will tell you, MISMO is very lucky to have you, because there's nobody that would do what you do and get the word out like that. And there's a lot of momentum. I think it's pretty cool the way you.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I don't know how you create all that content. It's crazy.
Well, you're the AI company you're going to tell me about is going to help me accelerate that.
Yeah, I can only read so much, right? So let's just keep going at the pace you're going.
Yeah.
Hey, look, it takes adoption and it takes change, and it takes conversations like this where it gets out to a broader audience so that they can start thinking about it, because nothing really happens until we get much broader adoption.
Yeah.
So bringing together the state regulators and understanding how they fit in and play into this, and how, and Kate was talking about how a lender's thinking about using it, and it all interplays. And until we get to that point where all the puzzle pieces start to fit together and people can see that bigger vision, we don't get to have the kind of progress we want to have. And we've talked about this on this show before. We've talked about it in venues that we've made some progress, right? We're not still typing things in triplicate on carbon paper, but the manufacturing of wood doesn't change that much in our career.
Yeah.
I'll add to that. So the California Mortgage Bankers Association, we had our 3rd formal board meeting this week, and we were able to, we have KP public relations, so no relation to me, which is always my joke.
I'm like, is he all of a sudden talking to the third person? What's going on here?
Well, it's funny. The name, they're an incredible lobbying group, and so we're in the first week of March. We'll be in Sacramento, and having our legislative days, and they always host us at their office. And anyway, John and Indira are great, and they came in, and they always give us like an update of all AB 801 and all these House bills. So last session was one about AI, and if you guys recall, look, I'm going to steal a line from the University of Texas and equate it to the state of California. What starts here changes the world. When California regulates something, it does make its way across the country. And so they had this AI regulation that was like, any data, any AI, any algorithm, anywhere that has anything to do with our state's constituents, we need to see how you're making that decision. So Fannie and Freddie, in theory, would have had to show their algorithms for DU and LP and their credit modeling, which by the way, I was like, let it happen, because now I don't have to pay all these expensive credit reports. I could just use raw trade line data like Fannie and Freddie do. Anyway, but that bill was pushed back. But like most bills in this state, they will make their way back in the next session, which, they start to formulate again in February. So we were game planning for 26 and talking about, what do we want to spend money on to go fight? What do we want to spend, time and effort on to lobby? What do we want to litigate on? I mean, we're litigating, right? So on a couple of things. So there was a retroactive one they did for servicers that they threw in the last minute, and no one had a chance to do anything. And literally in 2 days, threw a rider on a bill that was about to pass, and we're like, what? So we're litigating that one on behalf of the industry. So I think it's important. I think Mitch Kiter had a quote on LinkedIn somewhere last night. I think it was one of Greg's posts about Rohit Chopra stepping into kind of a state role, and and that's when there's a changeover at the administration, these guys, they all go find some high-paying job, use their influence. I don't know what we're going to use our influence on. It worked out for you, Brian. You're MISMO president, but I will say, it's interesting that this stuff just keeps coming back around. And we are going to have to battle these things at the state, and fortunately at the federal level, when it comes to AI, regulation has been kind of hands off. I mean, the SEC has been hands off. They're approving deals. I mean, look at, Netflix just bought Warner Brothers today, which was, roadblocked for years over there. Does anyone even care? Like, oh, it's anti-competitive. No one watches Warner Brothers streaming, right? Like, no one, they just don't, right? And so it's a failing business. It doesn't make any money, but there's some good content out there. So give it to a better platform that people actually like and use, as opposed to go, it's anti-competitive. I don't watch Netflix, but I hear it's pretty cool.
You don't have time to watch Netflix. You're reading all of Brian's posts.
That's right.
I'm a big reader. I'm a big reader. Little soundbite videos from CNBC because I like to keep tabs of what's going on in business, and a lot of analysis on business in general. I think you guys saw my LinkedIn post last night. Walmart's doing drone delivery, and Archer is going to have mini helicopters, lightweight helicopters called eVTOLs, in Miami in a couple of years. So there's some cool stuff going on. And our industry is got some really great stuff as well.
Well, you bring up a good point about reading. And one of the things I like about reading, and not doom scrolling and reading the things that people post and getting lost in the comments, but actually reading, picking up a book or picking up an article that you might read online, is it helps you form your own opinion. And when you read not only things from our industry to stay informed, but when you read things outside of the industry, it kind of gives you a perspective of what could infiltrate our industry. Because our competition isn't just other lenders. Our competition is anywhere somebody can do something else with their money. They can choose to consume it and buy avocado toast in Starbucks or whatever. They can choose to go on vacation. They can choose to save for the down payment of their home. And we have to be cognizant of that. And so a broad, diverse reading can really help you figure out how to drive your business. And that's true from the C-suite leadership down to the LO running their own individual business. And I think I would argue it's even stronger for the LO running their own individual business, because you're having a dynamic conversation with that borrower who has those choices and is actively making those choices. And so how can you influence them in a way that's best for them, right? Provide that right advice and be that counselor in person. So yay for reading.
I also love memes. So a fellow female friend and colleague sent me a meme this morning, and it said, woman on her third iced coffee, doom scrolling, hitting her vape pen, admits she has anxiety. It was amazing. By the way, no one took up the mantle more than Brian when it came to originator, engagement with FinLocker the last few years. I mean, that was an epic run, and I'm kind of torn, because I think there's apathy among originators and there's apathy among borrowers, right? So getting the right, engagement is almost always a matter of timing. Like, did you make the call at the right time? Did you hit the trigger point at the right time when they want to actually talk to a human being, as opposed to just disseminate information? And so this whole lead nurturing thing is a great theory, but it's got to lead to the touch point at the right time, right? And so and that's what you guys have been doing over at FinLockers, trying to get that right timing. Like perpetual DU running in the background, I thought was cool, so life's about timing. Rates are low. Rates are at a good spot. Inflation came in low today. It's September PCE, so it's stale data. But did anyone realize that the core PCE went down? And so, I'm not going to sit here and go, inflation's coming down, oh my gosh, it's coming down, But I will tell you, the people who bang the drums the loudest on data are the ones who are negative. And they've been wrong for a year. Okay? So they've been wrong for a year. And so I just everyone just needs to chill out with because what you mostly read is a reflection of someone's mindset. I'll use gold bugs, for example, not to pick on them, because gold is a great asset. The gold bugs, people who invest in gold, are some of the most conservative doomsdayer people you will ever know, right? We're going broke, which we are, but at a slower pace than probably gold would like to say. Gold's going up because inflation's running forever and it's rampant, and we're going to hell. Gold's going up because China's buying a lot of gold because they're trying to get off the dollar. Okay, that's what's actually happening in gold, right? And so but if you watch these people, their mindset is reflected in what they invest in and what they write. And bearish news outsells positive bullish news 5-1. That's why there's doom scrolling. There's not positive vibe scrolling. There's not even a word for someone who wants to see the good in things. I don't really care. I'm Sicilian. I have no feelings and no heart. I just want to read the data.
Those are cat videos. If you want to be happy, just watch cat videos.
Yeah. I get those from my aunt. I love my aunt.
She's probably the happiest person around, because she probably watches cat videos all day.
I if you'd like an actual cat, like I can just send you an actual cat, KP. You can
I have one right here, sleeping
video.
in my office.
R.I.P. Peppercorn. Peppercorn was my cat for almost 20 years that I saved off the streets in Austin, by the way. That's how long I owned that.
20 years. Jeez.
Well, just about 20 years. Survived all the way through Fort Lauderdale, living out there for 13 years and out here for about 8. I came home from the Philly MBA, and poor little Peppercorn, who was relegated to the garage, she couldn't lift her head. And my sweet little 10-year-old, the one that made me get this mullet, she's like, "Can I go with you to the pound?" I'm like, "Sure." So we got this life lesson of passing a pet onto the Rainbow Bridge. So I'm a cat person and a dog person. They're both great. You know, you don't have to be binary. You don't have to be doom scroller or a positive person or cat or dog people. Like, you can embrace everything that's good or bad or just data.
Well, as of 9 weeks ago, we are now a dog and a cat family household. So we are fully embracing. All right. What do we want to cover here in the last segment? We got about 9 minutes left.
I have a funny prediction I've been saying for a few months. So I think right in the middle of Jerome Powell's Fed meeting and press conference next Wednesday, Trump will announce the next new Fed chair, like right in the middle of it.
There you go.
And if he's not that disrespectful, he'll wait till maybe shortly thereafter, because he wants to get that out there. And let's just say it's Kevin Hassett who's on his team currently, right? And so there's this prevailing wisdom that the board is going to be, dovish and do more cuts, which is what this administration wants. Honestly, the Fed is always behind. The market always leads the Fed. It always has, on the way up, on the way down. You can look at 10, 2s and shorter term bills on the Treasury yield curve, and you can see where the market, they say institutional traders are the smartest people, on Wall Street, and they lead the Fed. I don't think it really matters who's going to be there, because the market's going to tell them what they need to do. They're just going to take a little bit of time to do it because they're conservative. Maybe it speeds up, how quickly they cut or raise rates. They just ended quantitative tightening, and I think it's really important. I've been kind of hammering this point on my last couple of videos. The Fed balance sheet is how we fund our government, which spends more than we take in. But we're actually at an inflection point where this is like an unpopular belief or maybe unconventional wisdom, but the Fed balance sheet is not big enough to grow this economy beyond the point that we're at. And so contrary to popular belief, the Fed actually does need to expand the balance sheet. It's typically about 20% of the economy's GDP. And so, if we're at $6 trillion and we have a $30 trillion plus, GDP economy, we can't grow beyond that without the Fed getting in there. And so there's talk that they may start buying, $50 billion a month in treasuries and start putting treasuries back on their balance sheet, which actually brings down the yields across the curve, right? Maybe on the high end, if people think that that's inflationary, not the right move. But again, if you've watched the quarterly treasury funding announcement, what they do is they say, this is how many treasuries that we need to sell to fund our government. And if they keep it on the shorter end of the curve, they keep the long range of the 30-year long bond in the 20-year, which is really marked by TLT. If you want to watch that ETF, you can actually see that we're going to fund this thing at shorter duration bonds, and that could be bond friendly, which is mortgage rate friendly. So, we could really see sustainable high 5% average 30-year fixed rates across the board a little bit later in 26. And so the Fed has ended quantitative tightening. So they are no longer shrinking the balance sheet. They now are holding steady. And at some point, when there's some dislocation, banks can't borrow on these Fed overnight repo facilities. And not to get too wonky here, but that is the mechanics and the plumbing of how we do everything. That's how the flow of money works. And so they've already stopped shrinking the balance sheet. That happened December 1st. And at some point, maybe before something breaks, before labor breaks, before a bank fails, before Japan raises rates potentially next week, and all these unwinds happen and we have some dislocation in the market, stock market sells out, they may have to start buying treasuries and step in. I'm not saying zero interest rate policy, right? So they have different levers to pull, but they could start buying treasuries, which greases the skids, gets more money flowing, gets more velocity of money flowing, and then our economy grows. And so those are things that matter to mortgage rates and home affordability. And so I think they've done a good enough job of engineering a soft landing. We have not been in a full-blown recession. We've had rolling recessions in manufacturing. Numbers came out this week. And of course, we know housing has been a little bit depressed. But the good news is home price appreciation, if it flattens out, or even I think we saw a negative 0.2 month over month coming down, that makes houses a little bit more affordable on the margin for people who are having, a tough time getting in. Doesn't solve insurance, doesn't solve taxes, but it solves the bigger one on principal and interest and interest rates.
Wow. What if the Fed decides to buy different types of securities and they don't go and buy treasuries? Like that, there was an economist that I read that talked about, hey, in the past, housing was what drove the economy. And so when they looked at adding to their balance sheet, this is where they bought. And now we're looking at technology, specifically AI. What happens if they decide to buy NVIDIA instead of mortgage-backed securities?
So,
and how does that impact the overall market?
So about 1% of our GDP is from all these hyperscalers with their capital expenditures. So just OpenAI has got 1.4 trillion in CapEx out there, and they only make like $4 billion, right? In revenue. So to your point, so treasuries are first, right? Because Treasury and Fed works together to fund our government. Mortgage-backed securities were kind of seen as the second tier of securities that they may buy. So what you're speaking to is, so they have what's called corporate bonds. So Meta, their stock got punished because they said, they make literally hundreds of billions of dollars. They took out a $4 billion loan. They said, you know what, we're going to help. Instead of funding all of our CapEx expenditures on the metaverse, which they just said they're going to decrease, and the stock got a bump. Not a financial advisor, not responsible for your losses, only your profits. But they said, we're going to issue $4 billion of corporate bonds, right? So a bond against a company that is one of the best companies in the world is a safe bet. And if that yield is 5.5%, that's better than a 4.8% yielding 30-year treasury.
Absolutely.
And the maturity of those bonds, let's call it 5 to 10 years, right? And so it could be a wise investment with better return that greases the parts of the economy that's 1% of our GDP. So I'm a big fan of it. I think it's great. I think it's great money management. I'm a huge fan of those top 7 businesses because they're the best businesses in the world. And so if they do it, that could be something that a Kevin Hassett, who's part of this administration, who's taken bets inside Intel and AMD and rare earth mineral companies. And so they could do that with him being there. There could be a material change with him being on the leadership. He has to convince the rest of the board to vote on it. But that is something that they could do. I'm all for it, because if you can get a higher yield with our money, that's where I want our taxpayer money going. That's where I want our treasuries being sold at a higher yield, so the Fed makes more money on the money that they spend to grease the economy. So I'm all for that. Of course, I'd love for them to buy mortgage-backed securities as well, because that makes interest rates come down. But I think they want to stay away from that because it's still a high source of inflation. So even though owner's equivalent rent and some of these home price numbers, at least in the PCE that came out today for just September, we've been seeing the inflation numbers in housing, which is overwhelmingly the bulk of Americans' wealth, overwhelmingly the bulk of inflation in all these indices, PCE, CPI, whatever. It's been coming down. It's not low enough yet for them to say we're out of the woods on how much they bump up inflation. So I think they would skip MBS, and if they want to do an alternative, there's nothing wrong with corporate bonds for some of the best companies in the world, which make up 1% or more of our GDP currently.
I just think that's something interesting for folks to think about, that we may not get when we get into the quantitative easing and we get into adding to the Fed's balance sheet. It may not be the historical thing that we've always seen, which again, given this administration, be on the lookout. I think it could be interesting, and it could be something that we have case studies for years from now that we go back and look at.
It's a great point to bring up. I'm all for it. Do it. Let's make more money with money.
I don't think you get a vote, but speak up, put it out.
You do. If you vote for a certain administration or a certain House representative coming up a year from now, just under a year from now, or a senator, you absolutely get a vote. So if you're voting for this administration or anyone in this party that's all for that, they are the ones that pick who the Treasury Secretary is. They're the ones who are getting to pick the Fed chair. And so you do get a vote, and voting matters.
Fair point. I was talking about that you didn't get to vote for the Fed. You're not on the Fed board. They didn't ask for your vote, but put it out, put all the good things out into the universe. And exactly what you said is correct. Our votes do matter because who we vote for determines who gets appointed, which determines the policy that we have.
Yes.
Well, I think it's pretty likely that at least one of those Fed governors is a weekly watcher of the last word. So we'll leave that with our audience as the last word and hope that same Fed governor invites his or her colleagues to next week's show. Same place, same time, next Friday, 1 o'clock Eastern. We'll be back here. KP, Christy, have a great weekend. Christy, enjoy your trip to Atlanta.
All right. I'll keep you posted on who wins the game since nobody else.
Root against Alabama, root against BYU. UT sneaks in there, and let's go play Texas Tech in the first round and tell them to shut up with their weak-ass schedule. Oh, we're so good this year. Let's go kick their ass and love it.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Kyle.